And we will start it off with Tim Priester.
Here we go. Brian, I'm sure there's a long checklist of priorities against the Pittsburgh defense, but I'm wondering what's at the top of that list and where first down offense for you guys fits in. And secondly, in the second half against Pittsburgh 2 years ago, Book was 13 for 15, I think it was, for 158 yards. You had Claypool and Boykin there scoring a couple second half touchdowns. But what were you able to do in the second half of that game to take charge?
Yeah, we threw the ball a lot, obviously, in the second half against Pittsburgh. We didn't establish a running game. That won't be the case. We'll continue to run the football, and that's going to be a difficult chore. As you know, they're pretty much a quarters man team, which allows those safeties, free hits, and they're playing really a 9-man front. So, a couple of things. First of all, those are two NFL players that were able to, win some one-on-one matchups. So what we'll have to do in the second half is win some one-on-one matchups. And, that will be, by and large, a big part of the outcome of the game on Saturday, is that we will have to win one-on-one matchups, because it essentially is pretty much man-to-man throughout most of the game. And so we were able to get Chris Fink one-on-one. He was able to win against the safety. And then Claypool was able to win against Pinnock a couple of times. And of course, Boykin on the post against the corner fire. So again, being opportunistic with those one-on-one matchups is going to be key for us. But I think you mentioned first down. It's really being able to carve out an existence in the running game, and no one's really been able to do that up to this point.
We'll go next to Eric Hansen.
Brian, I've got a couple for you, and strangely, neither one has to do with injuries. The first one is you have been very complimentary of your current offensive line. You're going to have some turnover after the season. I wonder who among the young players have impressed you. And then the second question is, there's a big headache, I think, coming up in terms of roster management that you really can't back burner right now because you're offering kids in the 2022 class. How are you dealing with that weird scholarship math?
Yeah. Well, I had a dream the other night that all of the guys used the COVID eligibility and decided to all come back. So, of course, that was a dream. I don't think it's reality. But your point is well taken. The 2022 affects, the numbers, and the NCAA is going to allow you to play over that number in 2021. In other words, if some decide to come back, the university has the option to obviously fund those scholarships, but you have to make it right in 2022. So those numbers have to be balanced out. So we're looking ahead to manage those numbers. So a lot of our work is internal. You're not going to be able to figure out what that looks like from the outside in, because a lot of that has to do with conversations internally about how we manage this. And I know that sounds a lot of like jumbo talk, but it's really about conversations that have to be made within these walls about what 2020 looks like with guys that are currently on the roster. And I think you know what I mean. Young players that are getting ready, if you will, for that transition on the offensive line. I'd say Kristofic is doing a nice job for us. Zeke Correll doing a nice job for us. Lug, obviously becomes a guy that's ready to play for us. Patterson's back, and then we'll see, what happens with the rest of those guys that are ready to go. Does one of them decide that it's in his best interest to take another year? So, I think we'll still put together a very, very strong offensive line in 2021.
We'll go next to John Finneran.
Brian, I'll take the option pitch from Eric Hansen and ask you what's the update on injuries and also any COVID numbers, if you would.
Yeah, injury situation. Keys is back. He's cleared the concussion protocol, so he will travel to Pittsburgh. Good to see him back up and running, and feel really good for Lawrence. He's had a rough run of it, and it's nice to have him back out there smiling. So happy for Lawrence. In terms of injuries, Josh Lugg is really the only one. He's had that bad ankle, and he's not going to be able to play this week. So he is out of the 2 deep. So I think that's really, when I'm looking at our list of players, there are nobody that's unavailable. We had one COVID, but nobody that's in our 2 deep. So nobody that is in our 2 deep or that is traveling that will be unavailable for us.
We'll go next to Pete Sampson.
Brian, I had a couple sort of individual questions. One, Robert Hainsey and sort of his intellect for the game. It's so rare that a freshman could play and basically start on a Joe Moore award-winning team, like how the football IQ factored into that. And the second one was just on Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, if you could explain how a guy who is not 250 hits as hard as he does, the physics of that.
Yeah. So what really allowed Hainsey to excel at the position in which he played, he was well coached in high school, and he came in with really a high level of technical ability. He was never out of place in a sense that he didn't need a ton of work to be ready from a technical standpoint. And he was a really good athlete for his size. So when you combine those two, he was not a guy that was overweight and that we needed to kind of reshape his body. He was fit, he was athletic, and he was really technically sound. Then, as you've alluded to, he had a high football IQ. That doesn't normally happen with offensive linemen. When you put all those things together, it put him in a position to play early on. So he had a lot of factors working for him. Started with outstanding technique coming in as a high school player, being fit, not having to reshape his body, and then having that high IQ. As it relates to Owusu, he has a explosiveness to him that shows itself in the weight room, a vertical jump that shows a power that he exerts against the ground that he is able to translate onto the football field. So when he puts his foot in the ground, he's able to exert so much force that he can obviously bring his size of 215 pounds and snap as if he's 230 or 240 pounds. So it's that force and that strength that he has. And a lot of it he's built, but some of it was genetic as well. And he's taken both of those and he's relayed that to the football field. Not a lot of people do that.
Our next question will be from George Bashura.
Good afternoon, Coach. Your team is actually getting into a groove now of getting consecutive weeks of playing in Saturday games. How has the team progressed since first coming back from the stop 2.5 weeks ago?
Well, how has it progressed? I think we're really, figuring out, a lot about how to take our preparation and our process and apply it to the game. I think I talked a little bit about this maybe in our last press conference, is that our guys really do a really good job of preparing. We probably lacked a little bit of the intensity necessary last week, and that has been the focus this week in terms of practice. It's been clicking up the intensity level in everything that we do, and that attention to detail. We didn't have the attention to detail in certain areas, in particular the red zone, necessary to be effective, and the intensity necessary to put our opponent away. So that's about learning how to compete at the highest level, and our guys are learning about that. Even though they're veteran players, each year is a new year, and I think they're understanding that as we go into playing on the road for the first time.
We'll go next to Angelo Di Carlo.
Coach, I know you talked earlier in the week about the quarterback situation at Pitt, but I just wanted to know, how have you guys prepared, for that, not knowing necessarily what you're going to get?
Yeah, Mark Whipple is the key here, right? You're preparing for his style of offense as an offensive coordinator and what he likes to do. Going back to when he was at UMass and we played him at UMass, we've got a good sense of what they like to do and what he likes to do as an offensive coordinator, regardless of who the quarterback is. So that's a big inventory for us to prepare, regardless of who the quarterback is. Now, there's a difference between Pickett and Yellen. Pickett is a veteran quarterback and one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Yellen did a nice job for him last week as a freshman coming in. So we'll have a little bit something different for each quarterback, but you're still defending what coach has had as his resume over the many years that he's been coaching.
We'll go next to Patrick Engel.
Hey, Brian, following up on the roster management things that'll come from the COVID eligibility. When you mentioned you have to make it right in 2022, am I correct in interpreting that or understanding that as there won't be eligibility freebies per se for guys who take that COVID year in 2022, like there would be for, say, an Ian or Dalen or anyone from that 16 class who could play next year and not count against the 85? Is that's
correct? The NCAA is only going to give you a 1-year moratorium on the number of 85. So 85 can be stretched in 2021 for this COVID year, but it cannot be stretched past that. So you're influenced by the 2022 class. So whoever you take into your class in 2022, you've got to make it right within your program.
We'll go next to Timothyomalley.
Coach, you've regularly rotated along the defensive line the last few years, and Pitt's really takes that to the extreme to their advantage. What's the challenge for an offensive line other than obviously fresh bodies coming against guys all the time?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably at the defensive end, Tim. I mean, I think the depth that they have with the 4 ends in particular, when you bring a Morgan in or Alexander, excuse me, obviously when you're defending against, Weaver and Jones, I mean, you've got 2 premier 5th-year guys and you don't get much of a blow. In most instances, when those guys come out, you get a bit of a blow, when the next group comes in, but those 2 defensive ends that come in are just as talented and don't see that very often. I don't know that we have, I mean, whether it's maybe Clemson's the only team that we face that has that kind of depth at the defensive end position. Now, Clemson had more depth at the tackle position that we've ever seen, but this is probably the deepest defensive end position rotation that we've seen in quite some time.
We will wrap it up this afternoon with loose emoji.
Good afternoon, Coach. Jameer Smith went public yesterday on the reason for leaving football. In your years of coaching, spans 30 years or so, do you see this as more common, the issue with mental health, and why might that be?
Oh, mental health has been an issue in my 30 years of coaching. I think it's just today become, I don't know if it's ever easy to talk about, but it doesn't have I guess, a connotation of weakness. Jameer is the opposite of weak. He's a strong young man, and I love Jameer for his courage more than anything else. But I think it connotated weakness, and that's so far from the truth, and especially as it relates to Jameer. And so it's always been a concern when you're playing, a competitive game, one where there's so many pressures to live up to expectations, whether they be your own or others, and heap on that, at a national institution, bring in the academics, and mental health is certainly something that I've always had as something on my plate in my 30 years. I just think that it doesn't carry the same negative connotation that it has over the years.
All right, and we will wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Coach.
Yeah, you're welcome.